I am unapologetically Lutheran, but I'm always making sure that everybody knows that I am what is called a confessional Lutheran. And there is a reason for that distinction, why I always say I am unapologetically Lutheran, but I am a confessional Lutheran. Most of what the average normie knows about Lutheranism is either confusing Martin Luther for the photo-negative version or the ELCA. If you ever seen headlines in the news about transgender bishops or vaginal crucifixes and seen the term Lutheran associated with such, it's likely that you have encountered the ELCA and you are witnessing the absolute rot of the ELCA. And it's not fair that I would endure such things without inviting you, the audience, into my pain and misery, because today we're going to be reacting to the absolute cringe of one ELC pastor, Paul Drees. Now, Paul has a wide variety of cringe that I could be reacting to from his TikTok or whatever other pages he has online, but I wanted to react to one specific thing because it really didn't confuse me as much as it showed the chef's kiss of cringe, not just because of the blatant twisting of scripture that Paul does as if the Bible got a bad chiropractor, but also the smugness with which he presents this video and kind of owns himself in the process. So enough yapping, let's get to the cringe together. Okay, so this is 3 more Bible verses to confuse conservative Christians. There's more? I just realized, is this music copyrighted? Am I gonna get a copyright strike? Okay, so it seems like Paul Drees here is equating the eunuch in Acts chapter 8, the Ethiopian eunuch, with trans people. Trans people were welcomed in the early church, he says, as he smugly smiles. I will readily admit that I'm kind of a boomer. I don't keep up with modern parlance and everything, but I understand that Paul Drees is progressive type, right? So I did not realize that trans people were being equated with people who were mutilated back in the day, because that's what a eunuch is, right? A eunuch is a male who has been mutilated, who has been castrated, who has been cut off in the biblical sense, okay? So I guess trans people are just mutilated. I mean, to each his own. I guess that's the way you talk to trans people nowadays. Trans people are equal to mutilated people. Gotcha. Okay. So far, that's kind of based, I guess. So I guess I am a little bit confused as to why Paul Drees would say something so based.
Something so controversial yet so brave.
All right, Matthew 28, 1 through 10. The first Christian preacher was Mary Magdalene. Okay, so this is another thing that I kind of have a bit of an issue with when it comes to things like defining the office of the holy ministry, because if what Paul Drees is saying here, that the first Christian preacher was Mary Magdalene, well, first off, it was not just Mary Magdalene there. There were other women there as well. But if just talking about Jesus equates to the preaching office, then you're not preaching in this video because you're not talking. You're just smiling after calling trans people mutilated people. So is that preaching? Is just talking about Jesus preaching now? Is that the equation of the office of the holy ministry? Is that all it takes? This is one of the biggest problems with any argument that has to do with trying to put females into the office of the ministry. It actually demeans females. It really does, because what Paul Drees and other progressive Christians are saying is that you females, you women, you mean nothing to the gospel. You mean nothing to the church unless you're in a position of authority, unless you are a pastor. And every time you talk to somebody about Jesus, that must be preaching, right? That must be the role of a pastor, and you must want that authority. Right. I don't see anything in this passage about the office of the holy ministry. I don't see anything in this passage about preaching.
Not even once.
I see a group of women that are sharing the good news of the gospel. That's different. That's not getting up in a pulpit and having authority as a pastor of a church. So far, in his smug way, Paul Drees has said that trans people are mutilated and that women don't deserve anything unless they're in the pastoral office. So, yeah, I guess I'm a little bit confused at his tactic, but not necessarily confused by the Bible verses, because the Bible verses do not teach what he is saying that they teach. So let's see what else Paul Drees has to say to try to confuse us conservative Christians. Oh yes, Matthew 7, 1 through 5. I don't even have to read it because most of you probably know this. Judgment of others is always based in hypocrisy. That is the most taken out of context Bible verse ever. Don't you dare judge me. Well, let's read it fully in its context. Judge not that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. And with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you again. And why beholdest thou the mote in thy brother's eye, but considereth not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say to thy brother, let me pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. So it's clear from the context that Jesus is not saying judgment of others is always based in hypocrisy, because verse 5 says the opposite. Jesus is actually telling us how to judge, not to not judge. He's saying that the hypocrites judge as hypocrites. So therefore, pull out the beam from your own eye. But I really shouldn't have to explain any of that. That should be obvious from the text. But this has to do with Paul Drees wanting to make the scriptures say what he wants them to say. And he's laughing about it too, being very smug. But again, he kind of owns himself in all of this. He's called trans people mutilated people. He has said that women do not deserve anything in the church unless they're in the pastoral office, basically. And he's actually judging others for judging, which is actually not a part of his standard. So even he falls short of his own standard. Someone may come along and say, but Pastor Warr, you're taking him out of context. You're putting words in his mouth. You're twisting what Paul Drees is saying. So you do recognize when someone's doing that. So you can recognize that Paul Drees is actually doing that very same thing to Scripture. Now, leaving aside the fact that Paul Drees has kind of humiliated himself and kind of owned himself in all of this, none of what he says actually accords with the verses that he put on screen in its context and in its clarity. And this is why I wanted to share this cringe with all of you, because just like I said in the last video I posted about the clarity of Scripture, it's not that Scripture is dim on these topics, it's that people are dim. And when your goal is to try to confuse conservative Christians, you will make the Bible say whatever you want it to say. But that doesn't change that the Bible doesn't bend to your whim and your will. The Bible does not preach what you want it to preach. It preaches Christ crucified for the forgiveness of sins. It preaches that, yes, sin is sin. It preaches that women are not called to the pastoral office, and that's okay. And if you don't like those things, I suggest taking the name Lutheran off of your church sign. You are not a Christian. And before you say that I'm judging Paul Drees by saying he's not a Christian, well, first off, you're judging me for judging, so don't be judging me for judging people. And second, if you reject the very words of the supposed book that you claim as your authority, I can't call you a Christian. If you're not following Christ, I can't call you a Christian. We're not talking about following Christ in some hippy-dippy sort of, Jesus would not have done this type of way. No, we're talking about what does Jesus actually say? What does he actually teach? And what does the scriptures testify to? When the scriptures are clear, then the teachings of the church are clear. But if you've rejected the scriptures, just like the ELCA did, you'll also reject the confessions of the church. You'll reject the creeds. You'll reject all these things. This is why you see things like the Sparkle Creed in the ELCA. And this is what Lutherans, at least the confessional type like me, have to deal with when people say, oh, you're a Lutheran. I saw on the news that, no, stop right there. That was the ELCA. They're not Lutheran. They're not even Christian. Let her be. Let the whore of Babylon have her own destruction. You don't be a part of it. Go to a fellowship that will actually welcome you and will not twist the scriptures the way ones like Paul Drees twist the scriptures for their own destruction. So I think that's enough cringe for today. If you like what I do on this channel, you can subscribe. You can sign up for my newsletter. You get a free ebook with that, Faith, Fiction, and the Fight. Also, grab you some merch, support the channel. And until next time, go serve your king.